In the deep shadows of early morning on June 28, 1993, two New York State troopers patrol the quiet lanes of the Southern State Parkway on Long Island. The highway remains desolate at this hour, framed by dense clusters of trees that separate the asphalt from the sleeping suburban neighborhoods. The glow of sodium streetlights catches the rusted tailgate of a gray 1984 Mazda pickup truck traveling without a rear license plate. The troopers activate their overhead lights to initiate a routine traffic stop, expecting a simple citation for an equipment violation. Instead of pulling over to the gravel shoulder, the driver tightens his grip on the steering wheel and accelerates into the dark. The truck swerves across the dividing lines, pushing the aging engine to its limits as the troopers initiate a pursuit, weaving through the residential streets of Nassau County for 20 tense minutes and shattering the quiet night with screaming tires and wailing sirens. The chase comes to an abrupt halt when the fleeing truck careens out of control and smashes into a thick wooden utility pole directly in front of the county courthouse in Mineola. Troopers approach the disabled vehicle with their service weapons drawn, demanding the driver exit the truck and apprehending the mild-mannered man behind the wheel without any further resistance. As they secure the compliant driver in iron cuffs, a heavy, unmistakable odor of decay drifts from the open bed of the pickup. The troopers trace the scent to a bulky shape in the back, prompting them to pull back a heavy blue plastic tarp beneath the covering. They make a grim discovery that exposes one of New York's most prolific predators. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, a relentless wave of narcotics swept through the concrete canyons of New York City, leaving absolute devastation in its wake. This epidemic pushed countless vulnerable women to the extreme margins of society, forcing them to navigate a harrowing daily existence just to survive another night. Far from the glittering skylines of Midtown, these women walked the broken, neon-lit pavements of Allen Street in Lower Manhattan and the desolate, fog-covered industrial stretches of Brooklyn. They were daughters, mothers, and sisters who held on to memories of happier childhoods and quiet hopes for a secure future, even as the world around them offered nothing but profound societal neglect. Their daily routines consisted of navigating transient housing, seeking brief moments of safety in poorly lit diners, and facing constant looming threats from strangers in passing cars. The physical geography of their world was defined by narrow alleyways, chain link fences topped with rusted barbed wire, and deafening trains rattling overhead, masking the cries of the vulnerable. They lived in an environment where trust was a luxury few could afford, yet they formed tight-knit circles of mutual protection whenever possible. Society at large chose to look away, treating these struggling women as invisible entities rather than living, breathing human beings in desperate need of a lifeline. This isolation and lack of a protective community net created an expansive hunting ground for anyone harboring dark intentions. The sheer vastness of the city, with its millions of anonymous faces and labyrinthine street grids, offered perfect cover for a predator seeking those whom society had already abandoned. 30 miles east of the perilous city grid, the quiet, affluent suburb of East Meadow, Long Island, offered a stark contrast of manicured lawns and absolute security. Here, heavy oak doors were left unlocked, neighborhood watch signs stood guard on pristine corners, and the only nighttime sounds were the gentle hum of cicadas and lawn sprinklers. Within this idyllic sanctuary lived Joel Rifkin, an underemployed landscaper who shared his childhood home with his aging mother and younger sister. He projected the image of a quiet, harmless eccentric who spent his days tending to neighborhood flower beds and driving his father's aging vehicles down familiar, sunlit lanes. Neighbors watched him prune rose bushes and sweep grass clippings from the pristine sidewalks, unaware of the obsessive, consuming fixations brewing behind his thick-rimmed glasses. The physical layout of his domestic life, a detached two-story house with a deep-set garage and Heavy wooden doors provided a fortress of privacy right in the middle of a bustling suburban block. Inside the walls of this unremarkable home, he compartmentalized his existence, separating his polite family interactions from the grim fantasies that commanded his waking hours. This jarring divide between the dangerous ignored streets of the city and the sheltered, trusting environment of suburbia provided the perfect camouflage. He crossed the boundary between these two distinct worlds at will, utilizing the parkways that connected the island to the city as his personal corridors. By exploiting the invisibility of his targets in the metropolis and retreating to the implicit trust of his quiet neighborhood, the landscaper engineered a terrifying double life. The brilliance of his camouflage lay in its overwhelming mediocrity, as he possessed no striking features, charismatic charm, or imposing physical presence that might trigger an alarm. When he traveled into the decaying industrial sectors of Brooklyn or the shadowed corners of lower Manhattan, he blended into the background noise of urban decay. He approached his targets with a soft-spoken demeanor, offering a false sense of security to women whose daily survival depended on reading the intentions of dangerous men. These women, exhausted by the relentless demands of street survival and the harsh judgment of the world, often saw a meek, unassuming man in a regular pickup truck. They stepped into the passenger seat seeking a brief respite from the biting cold or the sweltering city heat, unaware that the heavy metal door closing behind them sealed their fate. The victims were stripped of their futures by a man who viewed them not as human beings with dreams and families, but as mere objects to satisfy his grim compulsions. Back in East Meadow, the residents continued their tranquil routines, hosting weekend barbecues and walking their dogs past the very driveway where dark secrets were parked. No one could fathom that the quiet man next door was erasing lives in the city, using their peaceful neighborhood as a sanctuary for his aftermath. This disconnect highlights a terrifying reality of human nature, demonstrating how true darkness can hide behind a polite nod and a well-kept garden. The societal blindness toward the victims allowed the predator to establish a sickening rhythm, one that escalated from idle thoughts to catastrophic physical actions. In the freezing winter months of February 1989, the perilous reality of the city streets claimed its first known casualty in this harrowing string of disappearances. Heidi Balch, a vibrant young woman struggling against the crushing weight of the urban margins, vanished without a trace from the concrete avenues of Manhattan. She possessed a family who cared for her, carrying deep emotional ties and a personal history that made her absence a source of profound anguish for her loved ones. Her parents and siblings were left desperate for answers, navigating a massive city infrastructure that was already overwhelmed by thousands of missing persons reports. The physical distance between her last known location in the chaotic city grid and the quiet suburban enclaves where her predator resided created an immediate investigative void. She stepped into a vehicle to escape the biting winter wind and was never seen alive by her family again. The lack of witnesses on the desolate streets meant that no timeline could be established, and no suspect description was ever filed in the critical first 48 hours. Her disappearance marked a catastrophic point of no return for the suburban landscaper, shifting him from harboring dark fantasies to engaging in active physical predation. This initial strike shattered a psychological barrier, replacing his internal fixations with a grim, tactile reality that altered the trajectory of countless lives. For Heidi, her abrupt erasure from the world left a gaping hole in her family's heart, initiating a decades-long nightmare of unanswered questions and agonizing uncertainty. Weeks after the devastating disappearance, the horrific aftermath began to physically materialize across a vast, disjointed geographic landscape, complicating any chance of a unified police response. Far from the neon lights of Manhattan, groundskeepers at a quiet, sprawling golf course in Hopewell, New Jersey, made a grim discovery when they located a discarded paint can containing human remains. The spatial separation of the crime became even more complex when authorities located additional remains scattered near a desolate, wooded road in Jefferson Township, New Jersey. Finally, miles away from the previous two locations, a torso was pulled from the cold, turbulent currents of the East River, which acts as a natural border between Manhattan and the outer boroughs. Because the remains were degraded and separated across multiple state lines, investigators faced an insurmountable challenge in piecing together the victim's identity. Medical examiners and forensic technicians utilized every available method at the time, analyzing dental records and local fingerprint databases. But the profound lack of a centralized national system hindered their efforts. Authorities were unable to identify the young woman, labeling her as a Jane Doe and filing the case away in cold storage for over 2 decades. The vast distances between the discovery sites, spanning from deep New Jersey woodlands to the murky waters of New York, ensured that no single law enforcement agency connected the grim puzzle pieces. This extreme fragmentation of evidence meant that no localized alarm was sounded, leaving the communities blind to the presence of a mobile predator. The failure of the system to identify the first victim or connect the scattered discoveries sent a powerful, dangerous message to the man watching the news from his East Meadow living room. He realized that the transient, marginalized lifestyles of the women he targeted made them difficult for the authorities to track or prioritize. The lack of public panic, the absence of police sketches on the evening news, and the silence of the neighborhood watch validated his twisted sense of superiority. He learned that crossing state lines and utilizing the expansive, complex geography of the tri-state area provided an impenetrable shield against police scrutiny. The systemic vulnerabilities, namely the lack of communication between the New Jersey State Police, the New York City Police Department, and suburban county sheriffs, acted as an unintentional accomplice. He understood that as long as he selected victims from the fringes of society, the overwhelming bureaucracy of the city would swallow the missing persons reports whole. This realization erased any remaining hesitation or fear of capture, emboldening him to refine his methods and prepare for a prolonged campaign of terror. The tragic reality was that the very system designed to protect vulnerable citizens had rigid protocols and deep jurisdictional divides that by nature protected the predator instead. With the successful execution of his first grim act and the absolute silence of the authorities, the landscaper retreated to his quiet suburban life, planning his next foray into the city. A dangerous precedent was now established, setting the stage for an unprecedented escalation that would plague the region for the next 4 years. As the winter thaw of 1990 gives way to the suffocating summer heat of New York City, the dangerous streets claim more vulnerable lives. Women walking the commercial corridors of Brooklyn and the shadowed avenues of Lower Manhattan vanish into the night without a trace. These women carry deep aspirations, holding on to fading memories of family dinners and childhood laughter while navigating a harsh daily survival. The predator from East Meadow establishes a grim, calculated routine, utilizing the expansive highway network to hunt. He drives his gray pickup truck 30 miles from his quiet suburban driveway into the heart of the city grid. He exploits the exhaustion of these women, offering a warm seat and a false promise of safety. Once the heavy metal passenger door closes, their futures are stolen. The predator transports them back across the county line into his mother's detached garage in Nassau County. The physical layout of this suburban sanctuary provides him with an impenetrable fortress. The heavy wooden garage doors shut out the prying eyes of neighbors, creating an isolated chamber of horror just feet away from manicured lawns. Inside this humid, concrete-floored space, he strips away their dignity and inflicts immense psychological terror. The victims endure their final moments surrounded by mundane gardening tools and coiled hoses, isolated from the world they knew. He acts with cold precision, ensuring no sound escapes the cinder block walls while his family sleeps upstairs. The aftermath of his actions requires a complex logistical operation, turning the tri-state area into a sprawling, disjointed graveyard. He utilizes heavy industrial items to conceal the grim reality of his crimes, purchasing heavy-duty plastic tarps, 55-gallon steel drums, and large antique steamer trunks. The immense weight of his cargo forces him to map out desolate drop zones along the waterways and secluded dirt roads of the region. He drives back onto the highways, hauling the concealed remains through toll booths and past highway patrol cruisers without raising a single alarm. The physical distances involved are staggering, spanning from the dense pine barrens of southern New Jersey to the murky, turbulent currents of the East River. He dumps the steel drums into the waterways, relying on the heavy currents to wash away any remaining physical evidence. He abandons the plastic-wrapped parcels in overgrown ravines near local airports and quiet suburban industrial parks. Each distinct location represents a deliberate choice to fracture the geographic connections between the missing women. The communities surrounding these drop zones wake up to another ordinary morning, oblivious to the horrific cargo resting just beyond the tree line. The predator returns to East Meadow, washing the bed of his truck with heavy bleach and ammonia to erase the scent of decay. His confidence swells with every successful trip, building a terrifying sense of invincibility. While the predator perfects his grim routine throughout 1990 and into 1991, the law enforcement apparatus of New York City faces an unprecedented collapse. The five boroughs experience a staggering wave of violence, with officials recording over 2,000 unrelated homicides in a single calendar year. Detectives working the precincts of Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn drown beneath mountains of manila folders and endless crime scene reports. When the frantic families of the missing women approach the heavy wooden desks of the local precincts, their pleas fall on exhausted ears. Desk sergeants categorize the disappearances as routine runaways, pointing to the victims' transient lifestyles and history of substance dependency as reasons to delay investigations. This rigid bureaucratic protocol requires families to wait before filing official reports, losing the most critical hours for evidence collection. Furthermore, the immense jurisdictional divide between the New York City Police Department, the Nassau County Police Department, and the New Jersey State Troopers creates an impenetrable wall of silence. No centralized computer network exists to link a missing persons report in Manhattan with a physical discovery in a New Jersey woodland. The agencies operate in isolated silos, relying on paper teletypes that often end up buried in overflowing outboxes. The system fails the victims, allowing a coordinated string of disappearances to masquerade as unconnected tragedies. This extreme fragmentation leads to a massive investigative dead end that paralyzes the momentum of local detectives. As sanitation workers and local hikers stumble upon the discarded remains, medical examiners face an impossible task. The bodies arrive at the county morgues in advanced states of decay, stripped of identifying personal effects or clothing. Investigators attempt to pull fingerprints and cross-reference them with local precinct records, but the decentralized nature of the databases yields zero matches. Dental records prove useless, as many of these marginalized women lack access to regular medical care, leaving no charts to compare against the grim discoveries. Detectives stare at the unnamed files on their desks, unable to put a face or a name to the victims. Without an identity, investigators cannot trace the victims' final steps, interview their associates, or establish a timeline of their disappearances. The Jane Does accumulate in the cold storage units of multiple counties, treated as tragic anomalies rather than pieces of a massive puzzle. Detectives dismiss any notion of a serial predator operating in the region, operating under the flawed assumption that the sheer volume of city violence accounts for the deaths. This specific failure to establish a cohesive behavioral profile grants the landscaper complete freedom to continue his reign of terror unchecked. Moving into the heavy summer of 1992, The predator sheds his remaining caution, driven by an arrogant belief in his own absolute superiority. He no longer confines his horrific actions to the cold concrete floor of the detached garage. Taking advantage of his mother and sister's temporary absences, he guides his victims through the front door of the quiet East Meadow home. The spatial reality of this escalation is chilling as he brings the perilous dangers of the city into a pristine suburban living room. He subjects the women to immense psychological torment within feet of family portraits and floral couches, stripping away their hope in a house meant for warmth. When his family returns from their daily errands, they walk across carpets and sit on furniture that harbor dark, invisible secrets. The perpetrator scrubs the environment with industrial cleaners, masking the metallic scent of his crimes with the heavy odor of lemon polish and bleach. He sits at the dinner table with his mother, engaging in mundane conversations about landscaping jobs while the concealed aftermath of his actions rests just yards away. The neighborhood watch continues to patrol the streets outside, blind to the monster hiding behind the facade of a polite, back-skeskable son. This dual existence requires a staggering level of psychological compartmentalization, proving his actions are not the result of sudden impulse, but calculated, cold-blooded intent. By the early months of 1993, the frequency of the disappearances reaches a fever pitch, tearing a massive hole in the vulnerable communities of the city. 16 women have now vanished from the neon-lit avenues, their futures erased by the unassuming man in the gray Mazda pickup. The immense volume of his crimes begins to strain his meticulous disposal methods, forcing him to take unprecedented risks. He exhausts his supply of industrial drums and antique trunks, resorting to using whatever materials he can find within the cluttered garage. The physical evidence mounts as he leaves wrapped parcels closer to active roadways, discarding his horrific cargo in shallow ravines just off the Southern State Parkway. Despite this dangerous carelessness, the rigid structure of the divided police departments holds firm, refusing to connect the dots of the escalating crisis. The missing persons reports continue to gather dust in separate jurisdictions, while the families of the victims endure agonizing sleepless nights waiting for answers. The predator cruises the highways with absolute impunity, convinced that the systemic blindness of the authorities will protect him forever. He views the flashing lights of police cruisers as mere background noise, unaware that a simple mechanical oversight on his own vehicle will soon shatter his perfect camouflage. The stage is set for a sudden, violent unraveling as the invisible barrier between the city's forgotten victims and the tranquil suburbs prepares to shatter. The heavy, oppressive humidity of late June 1993 settled over the broken pavement of Lower Manhattan. The intersection of Allen Street and Brome Street stood as a chaotic nexus of transient lives and deafening commercial traffic. Within this harsh, unforgiving environment stood 22-year-old Tiffany Rassani, a young woman navigating the perilous margins of the city. She walked alongside her boyfriend Dave Rubenstein, a local punk rock musician holding on to the desperate hope of securing a safer future away from the concrete shadows. The couple operated as a vigilant team, relying entirely on each other to survive the endless dangerous nights on the urban grid. In the early morning hours of June 24th, a rusted gray 1984 Mazda pickup truck pulled tight against the street curb. Dave stood less than 50 feet away from the idling vehicle, maintaining a clear line of sight under the glow of a sodium street lamp. He observed the exact make, model, and mechanical wear on the fenders of the truck from his vantage point. He watched a polite, back-scheduled driver lean across the vinyl bench seat to offer a warm refuge from the sticky urban heat. Tiffany stepped up to the open passenger side and climbed inside the quiet cab of the vehicle. The heavy metal door slammed shut with a metallic finality, stealing her physical presence from the street in a single instant. The truck merged back into the endless stream of southbound traffic, disappearing down the dark asphalt corridor. Recognizing an immediate, visceral threat, Dave memorized the distinct physical characteristics of the pickup truck. He committed the exact shape of the taillights and the color of the rusted tailgate to his permanent memory. Armed with this highly specific vehicle description, Dave Rubenstein rushed to the heavy wooden doors of the local Manhattan Police Precinct. He approached the high front desk and provided detectives with a concrete, detailed account of the gray Mazda pickup. This specific interaction delivered the most crucial investigative lead of the entire 4-year crisis directly into the hands of law enforcement. However, the immense administrative machinery of the New York City Police Department processed the citizen report at a glacial, agonizing pace. The desk sergeants recorded the details on standard paper forms, placing the urgent intelligence into physical outboxes rather than an instant digital network. The spatial divide between the bustling Lower East Side precinct and the active highway patrol units created an immediate catastrophic delay. Bureaucratic sluggishness prevented the immediate authorization of a coordinated street-level dragnet or the deployment of a city-wide vehicle alert. The rigid protocols regarding adult missing persons required investigators to wait before launching a full-scale search, operating under the flawed assumption of voluntary departure. While Dave paced the concrete sidewalks outside the precinct waiting for action, the perpetrator utilized this administrative blind spot to transport his victim out of the borough. The pickup truck crossed the county line into Nassau County without passing a single alerted highway patrol cruiser. The failure of the local precinct to instantly broadcast the vehicle description left the suburban perimeters entirely unguarded. This specific systemic vulnerability granted the predator the exact window of time he required to secure his target inside his private domain. The vital clue remained trapped on a piece of carbon paper while the terrible reality unfolded 30 miles away in East Meadow. The immense city infrastructure designed to protect its citizens effectively shielded the perpetrator through sheer administrative friction. The stolen hours stretched into agonizing days as the predator confined his victim inside the detached, cinder-block garage on his quiet residential street. He utilized this familiar, locked domestic environment to inflict immense psychological terror, isolating her completely from the world she knew. By the deep, shadowed hours of June 28th, he prepared to transport his grim cargo away from his mother's property. He wrapped the remains in a thick blue plastic tarp and loaded the heavy bundle directly into the bed of the gray Mazda pickup. He intended to discard the physical evidence in an overgrown ravine near Republic Airport in Farmingdale, carefully mapping the route in his mind. This specific journey required him to navigate the desolate, unlit stretches of the Southern State Parkway during the darkest hour of the night. In his arrogant haste to leave the garage, he failed to realize a crucial, glaring mechanical error on the exterior of his vehicle. The rear license plate of the truck was completely missing from the metal bumper bracket. 2 vigilant New York State troopers patrolling the quiet highway spotted the empty bracket and activated their overhead lights. The flashing red and blue beams illuminated the dark cabin of the moving pickup, demanding an immediate stop. Instead of yielding to the authorities, the driver tightened his grip on the steering wheel and pushed the roaring engine to its absolute limit. The screaming tires swerved through the residential lanes of Nassau County, shattering the suburban silence with a chaotic 20-minute pursuit. Reaching the streets of Mineola, the truck lost traction and smashed the front radiator into a thick wooden utility pole. Glass rained onto the pavement as the troopers drew their service weapons, ordered the compliant driver to the ground, and secured his wrists in heavy iron cuffs. As the authorities secured the crash site, a heavy, unmistakable odor of decay drifted from the crumpled truck bed, prompting a grim inspection. The troopers pulled back the thick blue plastic tarp, uncovering the tragic fate of Tiffany Bryzany and instantly ending the 4-year reign of terror. Officers transported the compliant driver 3 miles down the road to the stark, fluorescent-lit interrogation rooms of the Nassau County Police Headquarters. Veteran detectives stepped into the small windowless space, bracing themselves for a grueling cycle of predictable denials and fabricated alibis. The suspect sat completely still at the metal table with his hands folded neatly over his lap, dropping his polite suburban facade entirely. After asking the officers for a simple glass of water, he began speaking with a chilling, matter-of-fact detachment that paralyzed the experienced investigators. He began to list physical landmarks across the sprawling tri-state area without prompting, requesting a pen and a stack of yellow legal paper. He drew exact maps of the complex highway systems, marking precise drop zones with dark ink and detailing 17 distinct events. He described the specific water currents of the East River and mapped the desolate pine barrens of southern New Jersey from pure memory. He pinpointed the exact locations of discarded steel drums and antique steamer trunks, matching details only the true perpetrator could possibly know. The detectives listened in absolute stunned silence, their pens frozen above their notepads as the overwhelming scale of the confession unfolded. This specific admission shattered their foundational understanding of the local crime wave, proving the unconnected missing persons reports were the work of a single predator. The devastating realization struck the room with tremendous force as the officers grasped the magnitude of their geographic and systemic blindness. A quiet, unassuming local landscaper had utilized the massive jurisdictional divides of the region to operate completely undetected right under their noses. The staggering magnitude of the interrogation room confessions launched an unprecedented, multi-jurisdictional recovery operation at the break of dawn. Detectives from the New York City Police Department, the Nassau County Police Department, and the New Jersey State Police finally dismantled their rigid bureaucratic walls. The isolated agencies formed a unified task force, transforming a fractured investigative landscape into a highly coordinated command center. Command officers shared physical files and synchronized their missing persons databases, directly linking the specific names of forgotten women to the locations drawn on the legal paper. Law enforcement deployed specialized dive teams into the murky, turbulent currents of the East River, utilizing heavy sonar equipment to scan the riverbed. These underwater units located the submerged 55-gallon steel drums exactly where the hand-drawn maps indicated. Simultaneously, recovery units traveled miles across state lines, bringing heavy excavation machinery to the overgrown ravines of Jefferson Township. Other evidence teams combed the desolate perimeters of Long Island airports, peeling back layers of dense brush to find the discarded antique steamer trunks. The forensic specialists meticulously exhumed the concealed items, logging every piece of canvas and heavy plastic into a newly centralized chain of custody. This specific coordination represented the exact type of law enforcement response that should have existed years prior. By finally bridging the gap between city precincts and suburban highway patrols, the authorities reclaimed the physical narrative of the crimes. The immense geographic spread of the recovery sites visually demonstrated the terrifying mobility of the suburban predator. The physical evidence retrieved from the water and the earth provided the crucial foundation required to build an impenetrable legal case. The task force secured the sprawling crime scenes, shifting the massive burden of proof from the streets to the laboratories. With the physical evidence secured, medical examiners worked tirelessly inside the sterile confines of the county morgues to unravel the biological puzzles. They utilized modern cross-referencing techniques to match the recovered physical evidence against decades of neglected runway reports and missing persons flyers. Dental records previously useless without a centralized database were finally compared against the specific timelines provided by the task force. Investigators successfully restored distinct names, histories, and identities to the women society had historically pushed into the shadows. This painstaking process shifted the victims from anonymous cold case files to recognized human beings with deep ties to their communities. The task force officers traveled across the 5 boroughs, knocking on the doors of estranged families to deliver definitive, heartbreaking answers. They sat in quiet living rooms and explained the grim realities to parents and siblings who had waited years for any sign of their loved ones. The detectives provided grieving families with a devastating close to years of agonizing uncertainty, replacing false hope with absolute truth. This specific act of official recognition ensured the victims were honored as daughters, mothers, and sisters rather than mere urban statistics. The painful notifications rippled through the marginalized neighborhoods, validating the long-ignored fears of the vulnerable street communities. While the system had failed to protect the women in life, the forensic teams dedicated every available resource to honoring them in death. The exhaustive identification process allowed families to hold proper memorials and reclaim the narratives of their stolen relatives. The transition from nameless victims to fully recognized individuals armed the upcoming prosecution with powerful, undeniable human stakes. In the spring of 1994, the criminal justice system convened inside a heavy oak-paneled courtroom at the Nassau County Courthouse to